It is my pleasure to welcome you to this first Science Meets Society session, subplenary session. This is called the President's Discussion, because I'm the president, and the title is Translating Scientific Research into Effective Forest Management to Meet Multiple Social Objectives, Challenges and Opportunities. Why did I pick this topic as the focal question for this session? I think it is well known that we have, although we have so much knowledge and experience in the scientific community, there's a persistent gap between our generation of knowledge and our transmission of this knowledge to people who can really use it. And that's practitioners in the field and decision makers, from individual forest managers up through policymakers. So as we know, in this era of very rapid environmental, economic, and social change, forest managers and policymakers have to deal with a variety of complex challenges and are obligated to balance often conflicting objectives to meet multiple demands placed on forests by stakeholders and society at large. What we're going to do in this session is we have a variety of very distinguished panelists, and based on their experiences in different contexts, the discussants will consider how forest science and research organizations, and in some cases, the holders and users of traditional knowledge, can best work with forest managers and other decision makers to translate the knowledge from the scientific community into supportive policies and improved outcomes for forests and people. And, if possible, to articulate their views on the role of IUFRO as a networking organization in that whole process. And the way the session is going to run is, in a moment, I will introduce our 5 panelists. As I introduce them, each one will come up and take a place at the table on stage, and I will one by one I will pose a question to each of them, a separate, slightly different question based on their context, and they will respond to that for approximately 5 minutes. And after the 5 presentations, they'll be given an opportunity to comment on each other's presentations, or it's optional. And in the time remaining, we'll open the floor for questions for either for a specific panelist or an open question to all panelists. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Our first panelist is Angela Coleman, and Angela serves as the Associate Chief of the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Forest Service. During her distinguished 33-year career with the Forest Service, Angela has served in numerous leadership roles, including as Associate Deputy Chief of Business Operations, the Associate Deputy Chief of Research and Development, and now, of course, her current position. Before that, she served as a Deputy Regional Forester for the Pacific Southwest region for the National Forest located in California and parts of Nevada, and as a Regional Communications Director for the Southern region in Atlanta. Angela is a native of Phoenix City, Alabama, and she began her career as a news reporter for the Pulitzer Prize-winning Columbus Ledger-Enquirer. She's a summa cum laude graduate of Troy University, where she completed a postgraduate course at American University in Washington, D.C. She's a senior executive fellow. She was a senior executive fellow at Harvard University's Kennedy School of Government, and in 2010, she was sworn in as a member of the U.S. federal government's Senior Executive Service. So please join me in welcoming Angela. Our second panelist is Peter Meyer, who is the Managing Director of the Austrian Research Center for Forests, responsible for the development and implementation of the overall strategy and financial operations of his research center. From 2003 to 2002, he was also the executive director of IUFRO. Between 1998 to 2003, just before that, he was the head of the liaison unit of Forest Europe, responsible for developing pan-European forest policy. Peter holds a master's degree in forestry and political science and a PhD in forest policy. So welcome, Peter. Our third panelist is Cécile Bibiane Jebet, who I think needs no introduction if anyone was at the earlier plenary session. But Cécile is the founder of the African Women's Network for Community Management of Forests, based in Cameroon. She is also an agronomist and social forester by profession, and one of the extremely well-known leaders of CSO in Africa, an international women's rights advocate and gender specialist. She's been devoted to women's rights issues for the past 25 years. Cécile is a member of many networks and professional societies at regional, national, and global levels. She's also the recipient of numerous international awards for her outstanding work, including the Wangari Maathai Forest Champions Award, which she was awarded in 2022. Okay, Cécile is up here as well. Thank you. Next panelist is Eric Scheitzer. Eric is a researcher and former director of Embrapa. He's been with the Brazilian research agency Embrapa, and he's a forest engineer with a master's degree in renewable energy systems. He is currently working at Wood Tech Science, an innovation platform which aims at promoting the sustainable development of mass timber use and wood construction. He is a former general director of Embrapa Forestry. Along his long career, Eric has been both a researcher in the area of small-scale forestry and has had numerous administrative positions within Embrapa, and was coordinator also of Embrapa Africa, so involving a lot of collaboration between Brazil and Africa and many African countries. He was an office holder in IUFRO's Latin American and Caribbean Information Network in the 1990s. He served as a country representative in Brazil, of Brazil, from 2000 to 2005 within IUFRO, and is currently serving as a president's nominee for Latin America on our IUFRO board. Okay. And we have a fifth panelist, Jesu Bay. Is Jesu here? Ah, very good. Okay. Excellent. Jesu Bay is the president of the Korean National Institute for Forest Science in Korea, Republic of Korea. And he obtained his PhD in forest policies from Seoul National University in 1997. He's worked as a governmental delegation of the Republic of Korea at the UNFCCC. From between 2010 and 2012, he worked as a seconded scientist at CIFOR in Indonesia. And he was also principal investigator for a number of projects during his work with CIFOR. He has held major positions such as director of the Forest Policy Division and director general of the Future Forest Strategy Department of NIFOS since February, and has been working as the president of his organization since early 2023. So, with those introductions, so my first question is directed to Angela. So, Angela, considering all of your experience, how can forest scientists, research organizations, and the holders and users of traditional knowledge work most effectively with forest managers, landholders, local communities, and society at large to address the wildland fire challenge in the U.S. Angela.
Thank you, John, and thank you so much for inviting us to be part of this panel. I'm grateful and honored to be joining this panel with these esteemed colleagues. And I'm also grateful to you, John, for your leadership for IUFRO. You've done an incredible job, and this is just a wonderful gathering for scientists to come together and really talk about the wicked questions facing us in forestry. I'm going to share my perspectives based on my role with the U.S. Forest Service. We manage 78 million hectares of public lands, and we also provide support and assistance to public and private forests across the country. And what I'm most proud of, well, I'm proud of the whole agency, but one of the things I'm most proud of is the fact that we house a dedicated research and development unit in our organization, and that really helps to add to the credibility of the agency's work when it comes to having science-informed decision-making. But I'm going to go right to your question. It's a big one, and I want to get to all the parts of it. You talked about science in our work to respond to wildland fire. Wildland fire has become quite a tremendous challenge for the Forest Service and our nation as a whole. And some would say it's at a crisis stage. And I know that's not unique to the Forest Service. There are many other countries who are confronting very similar extreme conditions that are resulting from a changing climate, as well as the at-risk conditions of our ecological systems. And we're seeing more extreme wildfires and their devastation on people, on communities, on our resources, and certainly locales. In response to this, in January 2022, the Forest Service launched an ambitious 10-year effort that we call the Wildfire Crisis Strategy. Now, that strategy relies on decades of collaborative work that is built on bedrock science. It is founded on strong science integration. The strategy, of course, is driven by some historic investments by our government, as well as it emphasizes preventive treatments and actions like prescribed fire and thinning to help improve the health of the forest and encourage fire-adapted communities across all ownerships to become more resilient. And this is happening not just on National Forest System lands, but on public lands. This strategy requires us to work at large scale. It requires us to use the right tools, and most importantly, it helps us focus on the right places, the places at highest risk for wildfire outbreaks. And that distinction itself is based on strong science. It's founded on years of scientific research in a concept that we call fire sheds. These fire sheds are the areas that are most prone to high risk, to the risk of wildfires. They're usually somewhere around 100 million hectares in size, and they pose the greatest risk to communities and infrastructures. And they are the place where we are focusing and prioritizing our work. And this, of course, is based on the work that we've done as an agency in our research and development community. So the bottom line is science played an essential role in this work, and it continues to play a key role in supporting how we go about this work. So both foundational and applied science play crucial roles in the decisions and actions we take on our lands, and we do that in close proximity and close collaboration with our scientists within the agency and in a collaborative approach. I want to touch briefly on the importance of integrating indigenous knowledge in our actions as well. And we're certainly, as an agency, progressing with greater intention and respect for historic knowledge coming from our tribes. We found, for example, through our own research, which has been affirmed by indigenous communities, that wildland fire is essential and it's inevitable as a process that cannot be excluded forever from our fire-prone and fire-adapted ecosystems. In other words, fire can be used for good, for the good of ecological health. And this is one example where we're learning better ways to integrate research with what the tribes have done historically with fire on their lands. Just a couple of weeks ago, I had a chance alongside all of our top-level leadership in the Forest Service to visit tribal lands and to hear firsthand how they have had actions, cultural practices on the landscape to have fire be a part of the adapted landscape. And we, in a humble way, were the students to their practices. And it really was a profound moment for us. And we're looking with more intention at making sure that our systems include indigenous knowledge in our actions as we go forward, because it is respect for their indigenous knowledge that I think gives us greater perspective. In fact, I've had one of our leaders say it allows us to see our forests with both eyes, an eyes on our science as well as integrating the science of our indigenous people. Their expertise is just as important, and it plays a very big role if we're going to be successful in creating fire-adapted ecosystems that are healthy and resilient and help us curb the extreme conditions we're seeing from fires. Lastly, I want to touch on the need to pursue and invest in myriad relationships and partnerships at many different levels, across organizations, at all scales and cultures. We've learned as an agency, we cannot do this work alone. It is too large, the conditions are things we haven't seen before, and we really need to be open to accepting and pursuing new information, new innovation wherever we can find it. We are clear that we share stewardship responsibility for these lands. So we know we have to invest in strong relationships. We have to establish multiple networks locally, regionally, nationally, and yes, globally. And we know we must build community around scientific advancement. These are the foundations for applications of science, information, and action. And so we encourage scientists and managers within our organization to find better and innovative ways to work together with others as we identify the most important unanswered questions and work together to co-produce new knowledge. Moreover, we also have to work together to translate the significance of the science so that it is understood and used by societies so that it can make a difference. So what we've learned is that what we knew or what we were once certain about is shifting. It's changing. And climate change has forced us to understand that we must look to science to help us understand even more. It has underscored how interconnected and interdependent we are. So I hope that we're going to leave this meeting with a stronger commitment to build community, continue to work together so that we can achieve the sustainable future that we all wish for ourselves and certainly for future generations.
Thank you very much, Angela. It's a very comprehensive presentation, giving us a lot of food for thought and some insights and some great examples of what can be done. My next question is for Jesu Bay, and my question to you is: after decades of successful forest landscape restoration in Korea, which I think all of us know about, maturing forests in Korea now require long-term, multi-purpose, sustainable management. How does NIFOS communicate this need to the public to facilitate its realization?
Yeah, thank you, John. It is a great honor to participate in this session of the IUFRO Congress. Today, in response to the request from IUFRO, I'll share some insight on the first issues and the Korea has faced since the successful national reforestation program and the effort of the NIFOS to address these issues. Korean forests were in a dire state due to the 35 years of colonial rule in the early 20th century, the division of Korean Peninsula in 1945, and the Korean War from 1950 to 1953 for 3 years. Today, nearly 70 years later, the degraded lands have almost recovered. Our current forest growing stock per hectare has increased about 30 times compared to 1953. The international community regards Korea's national reforestation program as a global model of success. After reforestation success, Korea forests face new challenges. Present-day issues are more complex than those faced during the initial reforestation effort of the 1970s. There has been a notable shift in public perception, valuing forest and forestry for their ecological significance over mere resources, emphasizing public benefit over private gains, and prioritizing environmental benefit over economic consideration. Moreover, due to the prolonged reforestation period, there is a widespread perception that timber harvesting is harmful and ethically questionable. Despite a significant increase in forest growth, Korea's self-sufficiency in timber consumption remains low at only 50%. Meanwhile, there is growing public demand for various ecosystem services, such as climate change mitigation, biodiversity conservation, clean water supply, and forest recreation, and something like that. For the reason, Korean government is actively pursuing sustainable forest management to balance the social, economic, and environmental values of forest. However, many small-scale private forest owners who manage 66% of our forest face practical challenges in implementing SFM. Then, against the backdrop, how can I ensure sustainable and multi-purpose forest management from a long-term perspective? As a national research institution, what roles does NIPERS play in addressing these challenges? Let me now outline NIPERS' three key endeavors to tackle Korea's forest issues. First, we are conducting impactful research to understand the diverse value of forest and enhance their functionalities. To achieve this, we emphasize building robust research capabilities, implementing structured research management system focused on clear goals and mission, and fostering a research culture that encourages innovation beyond the conventional boundaries. Based on this, we conduct long-term monitoring research on the ecological impact of timber harvesting, aiming to develop SFM strategies that effectively balance timber harvesting with the ecosystem function. Second, we communicate our research findings to various stakeholders. It is essential to identify specific research clients, understand their data and information needs, and build tailored communication channels to deliver pertinent insight. We are currently developing a forest science and technology information sharing platform integrated with AI capabilities. This platform utilizes over 75 years of accumulated research data from NIPERS to provide customized information and insight to a wide range of users. Third, we implement rigorous procedures to monitor and enhance our initiatives. While devising sound plans is crucial, we also recognize the importance of continuously monitoring and improving our high-impact research endeavors and stakeholder communication efforts. In the Chinese classic, The Great Running, it is said, in all things, there is essence and outcomes. As a national research institution, our essence lies in conducting high-impact research and delivering tangible outcomes to our stakeholders. This concludes my discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very actually inspiring example an organization like NIFOS taking the time and the trouble to consult deeply with the stakeholders in order to adapt the research program to meet their needs. This is very impressive, so thank you for that. Our next panelist has the following question. The next panelist is Peter Meyer. And Peter, to increase forest resilience, safeguard ecosystem functions, and the long-term economic opportunities in the forest sector in the face of climate change, how is forest research meeting the needs of landowners, communities, forest managers, and the forest sector more broadly in Austria?
Thank you very much, John, and thanks for the invitation, and thanks for a very easy question. If I can answer all this, I'll probably get the Nobel Prize. So, good afternoon to all of you. It's very nice to see you all here at the President's discussion. The translation of forest research to management, of course, always has to do with politics, and therefore let me start with the famous science-policy interface. Very often I was talking about the Nobel Prize. We believe, well, we have such a bright idea and the results of our research is so good. This deserves the Nobel Prize as the minimum. And why don't the politicians understand how important this result is and why is it not implemented? And I'm sorry to say, ladies and gentlemen, 90% of what we find in research is not translated directly into political action. So that's the sad story. So it's only 10%, but very often these things are discussed, but behind closed curtains, or lead gradually to behavioral development or change. So it's not useless, so it's on the contrary, it's very important that you maintain your research, that you maintain to produce research results, because it will lead ultimately to changes, but you will not always, or in the rarest case, get the credit for it. Nevertheless, don't be disappointed. It's very important to still shape this science policy interface, and it's easier to do that if you have a good connection and you have social systems like the research system or the policy system, and you talk to each other and you find good connections, or with the managers of practical forest land. Nevertheless, it's very important that there are clear fences. Fences make good neighbors, that's what we say, and it's very important that as research institutions or universities, we maintain these borders, because otherwise we in the research community become not credible. So we will lose our credibility, and that is the worst we would see, I think, as research institutions. So very important, keep on good relations, understand what your vis-a-vis wants, but you have to be not disappointed if your research result is not directly implemented into a political change directly. Nevertheless, we have instruments, how we would like to see our science and our research translated into action by managing land, by planting trees, by doing things related to climate change. And of course, there are products and tools that we all use, and maybe it's conventional wisdom, but of course, you need the product for your target audience. So not the same product, or not one product will serve the different needs of different target audiences. Instagram or social media is good for a certain portion of society, but it might not be the tool that you would like to use for the practical forest management out in the field. There you probably need a piece of paper. You will need a one-page guideline how to implement things. And so you learn to know who you communicate to. And that is very important then to choose the tool that you are applying and that you are using. Another thing that is very important to translate and to increase the understanding and the resilience that what you were asking is also training and education. IUFRO for many, many years has this special program for developing capacities. And I think that's what IUFRO does very well globally, to train people from different countries, apply the collective wisdom of IUFRO, and then translate it to different groups that are interested in learning about forest management in their regional conditions. And I think that is a very good example how this knowledge is translated very concretely and very directly to a target group that is looking forward to finding solutions to their problem. And then there's, of course, participation and participation mechanisms that are very important. You need to, and Angela, you were making reference to that, the traditional forest knowledge, the stakeholder groups. You need credible participation mechanism. It's not enough to invite somebody, by the way. So you need also to enable participation.
Exactly.
So that's very important. It sometimes has to do with resources, of course. And then you can find joint models also, and then you translate that knowledge to that group in the best possible way. In research projects, I mean, you all know the public-private partnerships, I guess. There are many programs out there where you can do that. That's also one way of finding different interest groups together in one joint research effort, and then translate that and have a concrete management problem very often, and then also bring that to that group. I mean, IUFRO, you're doing the IUFRO Mondi partnership, for example, and I think that's one example of how to do that and how business and research can work together, again, with having the clear fence between what is research and what is business. Finally, John, if one looks at practically research results and also how to communicate things is like also find attractive names. We, for example, have a traffic light system for which tree you should plant in the future. When my phone rings from outside, it's what should I plant? So because of climate change, and maybe that's the same for many of you or persons you know in management, because that is the key question. How does climate change affect our forests in the future, and how do we do that? And with a traffic light system, that's very easily understood. You say, well, red is not so good, yellow maybe, green, you should do that. And so things like this, I think that's also very important in communication and bringing the knowledge to the practical management and and find solutions. Biodiversity hotspots, for example, also a very good communication tool. Identify those hotspots where you say, we want to preserve the forest, we want to preserve biodiversity. That's something, how you communicate and how you bring the knowledge also directly to the target audience or the managers of land. And I could go on and on with many of these examples, but I know there are others on the panel, so John, I will stop now and leave the floor to others. But again, I think, let me say that I think our sector in general and all of us, we shape the future. And I think that's something we should always be proud of and think of. Our sector, forests, wood and related spheres, is very important for answering the question, how do we want to live in the future? And I think that's what would be a take-home message from me, and that's also something that's easy to communicate. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Peter. You've touched on so many important issues, and there's a lot of experience behind what you said, and I particularly appreciate your highlighting the importance of communications, and particularly the need for scientists, the scientific community broadly, to develop very targeted communications depending on the stakeholder, the desired audience for this information and knowledge. So thank you very much. Our next panelist, to whom I'm going to address a question, would be Cecile. Cecile, I think you know what the question is, but I'm actually going to modify it a little bit, and I hope you don't mind that. It's in two parts then. So the original question that I was going to pose to you was, how does the African Women's Network for Community Management of Forests upscale its outreach to bring additional communities into their efforts? And if you have time, I would also like you to comment on the role of the forest science community in facilitating and supporting your efforts.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much, John. And thanks so much for coming to share with us our little experiences. Yes, the African Women Network for Community Management of Forest was created in 2009. Actually, we had the opportunity to participate in an international conference in Cameroon, where we were discussing about the role of communities, how to involve communities in the forest management, because so far they were really like outside the scene. And we were very lucky to have 9 delegates from 9 different countries, plus Cameroon, that was 10. And for us, it was really a great opportunity to sit together. So every evening after the normal sessions, women were gathering together to reflect on how we're going to continue in this sector, in the forestry sector in Africa. So that's how we created the network. And the 10 delegates were now the 10 focal points in each of the countries. So in the next, it was May, and then December, we organized our General Assembly, and we had now a board that was really like, moving, helping the network to move forward. And each of the focal points is responsible of mobilizing country participants. And we put emphasis on community because it's the community management of forests. And in the community, of course, women, because it's 100% a women network, so we're really targeting women. That's how we started, and we realized that our challenges were at 3 levels. The first one was how can we secure the tenure for the women, access to land. And the second one was how to build their capacities to be more organized, better organized, and work together efficiently. And the third was how to access the funding. And we realized that we needed to get into policy reforms so that we can change something on the tenure system. And we have built capacities in RED+, in tenure, in climate change. And what was very important and very effective is our influence in policies reform. We have really pushed for policy reform in land reform, forestry reform. And also we realized that many of our countries did not have the gender policy. And if you don't have a gender policy, it was really a problem for us. So we push also for that, and we have got a quite number of countries now with gender policies. Of course, the next step is to have it implemented. That's another challenge. But we have put emphasis on community visits, We had very good initiative on the ground, and we are making sure that community can visit other communities to learn from them. And we also take advantage of our participation to forum like this, to talk about what we are doing, to show what we are doing, and to gain more visibility. I'm sure that today, this morning when I spoke here, I don't know how many women in the room who are coming from other countries and want to join the network. So that's how we move from 10 to 20, and I think we are even moving from 20 to 25 this year because we have our General Assembly in November after the COP. That's how we are building it. Now, the second question, John, is very important because as I was saying this morning, women know exactly what we have to do and how to make things happen. But I think we are now having some problem. We are putting in place now a very great restoration program. But we have realized that we need some technical assistance because it's not that bad, but sometimes we are like 80% success and 20% losses, sometimes more. It depends on where we are. Of course, we are using agroforestry scheme because it combines food production, it combines economic empowerment, it combines, of course, carbon sequestration, but let's say climate change we are addressing also climate change on that. But the capacities are still needed to help women on the ground how to improve what they are doing. That we really need it. If we really want to upscale what we are doing, we also need those capacities. We also need, of course, I told it this morning, access to funding to try to support women initiative on the ground. So that's what I can say for now. Thank you very much.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cecile, for your words of wisdom and also for your flexibility in taking on an additional question during this session. Finally, last but not least, Eric, given your long experience with Embrapa and your knowledge of Brazil and a country with so many contrasts and challenges of all types in the forest sector, my question to you is, how does Embrapa promote diverse landscape management in Brazil through collaboration with forestry and agricultural companies, as well as local communities?
So, John, first, thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real honor to be here, and good afternoon to everybody. Well, Embrapa is not a forestry research company. We are an agricultural research company, and forestry is within the agricultural world. In Brazil, we have around 5 million farmers, and actually they are the one who deals with potatoes and trees. And I always go to discussions and say, well, there are more farmers with trees than farmers with wheat or cassava or whatever. So trees must be treated as part of an agricultural system. So first, Embrapa was a company, and our mission was to promote basically gain. We had a research model where we produced, we got needs from the farmer, and we would deliver our research results to the farmer. And so that led that we really increased the yield of production of all kinds of products in Brazil, from eucalypts to pines or to bracatinga, which is a local tree. We increased the yield, but we were very happy. Then suddenly people started to say, no, now we research from the farmer to the market. And we had to include quality in our research. That was okay, so we will produce more with quality. But I think in the last years, they came with a new invention, and they say that now we are not more researchers, we are solution providers to the development of society. So that was completely crazy, because questions which were not our questions became ours. Now we have to talk about gender, we have to talk about biodiversity, we have to talk about things which are complex, sometimes more complex than the research result per se. And at Embrapa, we are a network of research centers. We have 42 different centers. Part of them are what we call eco-regional centers. Brazil has 8 million square kilometers of area, and we have things which are as diverse as lowlands in southern Brazil and the Amazon basin. And so we have a number of centers which are eco-regional centers. So these eco-regional centers have two main responsibilities. One, talk to people. There's no research and no success in research without dialogue. So they talk to people. The other type of research center is specialty centers. So we will have a research center to forestry, where I work, another one to cassava, another one to corn, one for cattle, and all that. And so these ecosystem research centers, they have they make a matrix to the technical ones, and we should talk to each other and include solutions which go to the people. So this is the big challenge. Sometimes it's more challenging to talk among ourselves than to talk with the people per se. And so anyway, we try to do that, and we try to include all these cross-cutting questions in our discussions. So these, as we are solution providers, we have to provide the solution and talk to people. At least we have to talk in a scientific way and right to people. We have to talk to farmers, and which we have to deliver very simple 1, 2, 3 instructions. We have to talk to engineers who are in between them, the research, the extension services, and we have to talk to politicians. So currently we try to work very strongly both with extension in all levels. We cannot talk to 5 million researchers, with farmers, with our small group. And we try to talk to policymakers and also to the media in general. Currently, Embrapa is the Brazilian companies which has more appearances in national media after our petrol company, because they are always they have money, they are a problem, they are all they work with money. But we are very proud of our communication effort. We have a journalist here, and she will be one of the 140 journalists which we have in our network. So we also have our strategy to define national level priorities, and that's through dialogue. Actually, I do not have at Embrapa anything which says you have to do that on forestry, but we do have that we have to control, to provide water to the people, or manage landscape, and that will be valid to soil and to other things. And once we are working together, we try to set examples. For instance, we have a network here. One of our main technologies now is called integration livestock forestry, livestock, crop, and forestry systems, where we try to put everything together. And we have, with forestry, we have now more than 1 million hectares where we put trees into agricultural system. And that's our response to climate change. So we had climate change, we cut forests. Now we say we don't cut forests. We plant and include forests, promoting a better use of land. So you asked how we work with companies and people. I think a big thing we try to do with companies is to work with them as a springboard to develop technology. We have 5 million farmers. We have 40,000 forest companies in Brazil. So it makes lots of sense working with these 40,000 to develop technologies to the 5 million people. For instance, we are developing a sustainable management strategy with forest management strategy with softwares and things that give support to the management of natural forests. And we started with a group of 23 companies at CPM. And these 23 companies, they managed 5 million hectares. And once we are successful in working with them, we can communicate to others, to other 5 million. So it is, I think this is a quite complex thing to talk in 5 minutes. But what I want to say is that institutions have to be quite prepared to work in long term, because the view of the researcher is that of preparing a very nice cutting-edge paper, and once he finishes that, he moves to another area. So a large part of our institutional effort is to have a group that promotes technology transference and that keeps things for the future. So I have a colleague, I don't know if she's here, but she's breeding pines, using pines which were planted 40 years ago. So a very strong work our companies have is to keep the past alive and now generating innovation and other things. And that's currently tough to foot the bill. So bringing the past to build the future. Thank you, John.
No, thank you very much, Eric. There's so much that's been happening in Embrapa, and it's really heartening to hear of how agile your organization has been in adapting to changing interests and changing priorities of landowners, and how you view yourself as a solution provider. And I think that's a great phrase for all of us to keep in mind, why we're doing this work. In the interest of time, I'm going to not ask the panelists to comment on each other's, or add to each other's presentations, because they're all excellent presentations. And now I remember why I chose all of you, because you have 5 different success stories and different ways of going about going about the same basic question of integration of knowledge into land management work. So with the time we have remaining, it's about 5 minutes. I'd like to invite questions from the audience. I have to move over here so I can actually see. Yes, first question, and please identify yourself, where you're coming from, and if it's a question, if you want to direct it to one or all of the panelists, do so. If it's a comment, make it very, very brief, please, so we have time for a few questions. So, please. No, there's a microphone coming your way.
Hi, I'm Dorian. I'm a student from Wageningen University studying forest and nature conservation. I have a question to Peter Meyer. You mentioned this kind of simplification that is maybe necessary to bring the science to the practitioners. I wonder, in a world that is getting more and more complex the more we learn, and where everything, especially also in forestry, is context dependent, how do you do that? How do you produce that material, so to say, that is general enough to be useful, but specific enough to not be ruinous in the worst case? Thank you.
Should I respond directly? Yes.
By all means, Peter.
Of course, this is the trick, and that's what we are all struggling with. But again, I think it's very important that you identify your target audience. And if you talk to your research friends, then I think you can go into the full detail of the complexity. But then if you need to convey a message, then I think you should deduct this to an easy slogan and bring it to public media, for example, so that the attention is there, and then you have, and that's the best case, of course, time also to discuss more in detail with interested groups. But of course, it's something we have, it's a little trial and error for all of us. But in the times that we're living in, and with the quick social media feeds, I think sometimes you need to have short messages.
Great, thank you, Peter, and thank you for that question. Other, yes, you.
Hi, my name's Melissa Lair. I'm a postdoc at Penn State, and my question is for Angela. I really appreciate your perspective on incorporating indigenous knowledge into this work, and I was just wondering how a government agency like the USDA goes about establishing those partnerships.
Thank you for the question. It's really a good one. It requires us working at the local level. As you know, the Forest Service is a big, giant organization, but we're community-based. And so having local managers have the competency to work directly with tribes and be very respectful of their knowledge, of their history on the landscape is a part of the goal for this agency. And we're working hard at this point to equip our local line officers, our decision makers at the ground level, to be able to do that work on an intentional basis. We've always consulted with tribes, but the recognition of their expertise has not shown up in the way that it should as a part of scientific knowledge or knowledge that drives or informs a decision. We're being much more intentional about that. We just published a national strategy for our tribal work that sets a standard. And we've raised the level, again, of training and competency of certification of line officers, of land managers at the ground level to be able to do that more consistently. It's the intention behind the action that we're working on. And we've really, I think, done a great job as an agency of being very humble in inviting the knowledge of tribes and indigenous people into the decision-making process, and making sure they have access to us and we have access to them. That's been our biggest move, and we've heard a lot of feedback that we're making progress. But again, it's consistency and intention that's driving us. Great question, thank you.
Thank you.
I think we might have time for one more short question and answer before I wrap things up. I think there was a hand. Yes, there's a hand by a colleague back here. So wait for the microphone is coming. If you could identify yourself and pose your question.
Okay, my name is Vilma from Mozambique. I work for the U.S. Forest Service international programs. My question is also related to the indigenous knowledge and to incorporate that for decision making. I wanted to understand how, or what's the perspective in countries where the land belongs to the government. We don't have this indigenous own lands, or this information about the indigenous knowledge is not up to the decision makers, and most of the decisions come up down. How to incorporate this knowledge, how to uplift the information that is in the indigenous communities. Thank you.
Great question. To whom do you direct this, or is it a general question for whoever wants to take it on?
It's general, but Angela, I don't know if you want to answer that, looking at the what is going on in the U.S., but it's general.
Yeah.
Do you want to? Why don't you start?
Yeah, okay, I can start. Thank you for the question. The issue of land tenure or land ownership is real, especially for women in Africa in general. But women can own land by buying it. But what we are talking about, issues of land ownership, we have to understand at the traditional level, because of the patriarchal system we live in, women don't have access to inheritance so far. And part of let's say, what is part of the inheritance, we have land. And for women particularly, even myself, I don't have ownership in my father's land. But I use my mother part, because what we call, you have access, use right, but not property right. It's different. Only my brothers have the property right. And what do they say? How do they explain that? They say, I'm going to marry and I'm going to, to build my own family there. Unfortunately, even there, I can only use my husband's land. And if he passes away and I have not been lucky to have a male child, my husband's brothers will take out the land, even if I have been there for 60 years with him. So the issue, and we don't have a solution. Let's be honest about that. We don't have a solution. But what we are doing now as Refacov, because this is one of our main reason to be created, what we are doing is working with male-headed families, traditional chiefs, and parliamentarians. So we have those three key actors, but it starts with the male-headed families, because they own the land. So for example, we have this restoration project where we are doing, now what we are doing is home garden, and home chat, yeah. We planting fruit trees in combination with agricultural food product. And there, we have realized that male-headed families are very interested in those type of projects because the fruit give the money, improve the food, and they are one of the beneficiaries. And they are very more likely to now what we call traditional allowance, land allocation. That's what we are doing in that process that we are now. Traditional land allocation with male-headed family, where women can have that documentation. Even if the husband pass away, the documentation will be there that my husband gave this parcel of land to me. And we bring in traditional local authorities to witness the ceremony of land allocation. So we only have to think about strategies, because culturally I can say it's almost impossible. But now we are moving to another step with male-headed families supported by traditional chief in the villages and our parliamentarians who are there to try to push for law reform. That's what I can share so far. Thank you very much.
I'm just going to make it real quick,
Cecile.
John.
And Angela, if you have just
very
a
quickly.
brief addition to
I
that.
want to address the United States.
Yeah.
We in the United States, when it comes to our tribal lands, our tribes and their ancestral lands, we have a history that we also have to account for, where lands with treaties were ceded to the United States. And so many of the tribes who live have had history in the United States are not on the lands that they started on. Mm-hmm. And so the agency, the Forest Service, the government is now honoring the true history, acknowledging the real history of indigenous tribal people in this country. And we are on National Forest System lands, making sure in our decisions that we account for cultural practices and cultural religious needs that they have on those lands. But those lands were ceded to the government, so ownership is still a complicated system. We ended up placing or displacing tribes from their ancestral lands onto what are now their reservations and their properties. So the agency, the government as a whole, we still have a history to acknowledge when it comes to the influence of tribes on our lands, as well as their protecting their practices, as well as their cultural and their life-sustaining practices that they need. We still have to account for that on public lands. But it's a very complicated history that we've got to acknowledge and try to redeem when we think about the management of public lands.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And this discussion, which could go on for a very long time, and no one's left their seats, even though it's a coffee and tea break. But we do need to wrap up. But before we do, I'd just like to, before we thank all the panelists, I mean, a couple of take-home messages from my side. And I think it came through in all the discussions here. And the first is the overwhelming importance of communication to deepen the understanding with the people that we purport to serve, whether we're land managers or scientists. It's extremely important, and to have the correct communication for the right purpose with the right people. And underlying all that is to me is the importance of mutual respect. One word: respect between scientists, forest managers, communities. This is the foundation for, in my mind, for a positive relationship. And I think that's what we see playing out in these great examples that we've been hearing about. So at this juncture, although we could go on for a long time, I'd like to take this opportunity once again to thank our 5 excellent panelists for your contributions and congratulate you for your great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Very inspiring.
And I think now we have still 20 minutes left of tea and coffee break or thereabouts. So enjoy.